The scalding liquid hit my chest before I even registered what was happening. My father will have you fired from whatever pathetic job you have, you old bat. I stood there in my driveway, steam rising from my favorite cardigan, the one my late wife Margaret had knitted for me 30 years ago, watching this 20-something woman with designer sunglasses and perfectly manicured nails glare at me like I was something she'd scraped off her Louboutin heels. My name is Richard Montgomery. I'm 73 years old, a retired naval officer, and I've faced down enemy submarines in the Cold War. But nothing quite prepared me for meeting my son Daniel's new girlfriend, Vanessa. It had started innocently enough. Daniel had called me that morning, excited to introduce me to someone special. My boy, though at 35, I suppose I shouldn't call him that, had been unlucky in love. After his divorce 3 years ago, he'd been cautious about bringing anyone around to meet his old man. So when he said he wanted me to meet Vanessa, I was genuinely pleased. I'd spent the morning tidying up my modest 3-bedroom house, the one Margaret and I had bought when Daniel was just a baby. I'd even baked my famous apple pie using Margaret's recipe that had won the county fair twice. The house smelled like cinnamon and home. They arrived at noon. Daniel looked happy, almost nervous. The woman beside him looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, all sharp angles and expensive fabric. She examined my house the way a health inspector might examine a failing restaurant. "Dad, this is Vanessa," Daniel said, his voice full of hope. "Pleased to meet you, dear." I extended my hand. She looked at it like I was offering her a dead fish, then barely touched my fingertips before withdrawing. The lunch was awkward. Vanessa picked at my pot roast, made faces at my mashed potatoes, and spent most of the meal on her phone. When I asked about her work, she waved dismissively. "I don't really need to work," she said, examining her nails. "My father is Marcus Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries. I'm sure even you've heard of it." I had, actually. Blackwood Industries was one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeming impressed. "That's nice, dear, and what do you do with your time?" She looked at me like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. "I manage my social media presence. I'm an influencer." Daniel jumped in quickly. "Vanessa has over 2 million followers, Dad. She's really successful in her own right." I smiled and nodded, though I barely understood what that meant. The real trouble started when Vanessa excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone for perhaps 10 minutes, and when she returned, her face was twisted in disgust. "Your bathroom is disgusting," she announced. "There's actual mildew in the grout, and don't even get me started on that ancient toilet. What is this, a museum?" I felt my jaw tighten. My house might be old, but it was clean. I scrubbed that bathroom every week. "Vanessa," Daniel said quietly, a warning in his voice. But she was on a roll now. "And this furniture, Daniel, you grew up with this old person aesthetic. No wonder you dress so plain." My son's face went red. He'd always been sensitive about his appearance, especially after his ex-wife had criticized his wardrobe constantly. "I think that's enough," I said, my naval officer voice coming out, the one that had commanded respect from sailors half my age. Vanessa whirled on me. "Excuse me, you don't get to talk to me like that. Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," I replied calmly. "You're a guest in my home, and you're being incredibly rude." "Rude?" she laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "I'm being honest. Someone needs to tell you that this whole setup is pathetic. You're living in the past, old man, and you're dragging Daniel down with you with your weekly dinners and your guilt trips about family time." Daniel stood up. "Vanessa, we're leaving now." "No," she snapped. "I'm not done. Your father needs to understand that you have a new life now, with me, and that means cutting back on all this." She gestured around my dining room, "this sad, depressing nostalgia trip." Something in me snapped, not into anger, but into cold clarity. "Daniel," I said quietly, "take a walk around the block. Give me 5 minutes with Vanessa." My son looked between us, torn, but he knew that tone. He'd heard it when he was a boy and needed to learn a hard lesson. He nodded and left. Vanessa smirked. "What, you think you're going to intimidate me, old man?" "Not at all," I replied. "I'm going to tell you a story. When I was 25, I met my wife Margaret. I was a young officer, cocky and full of myself. We went to her parents' house for dinner, and I acted much like you're acting now. I criticized their home, their cooking, their lifestyle. I thought I was better than them." I paused, watching her face. She was still smirking, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. Margaret's father was a quiet man. He took me aside and said something I never forgot. "Son, the way you treat the people who can't do anything for you shows who you really are." Then he asked me to leave. Margaret stayed, and I thought I'd lost her forever. "Touching," Vanessa said sarcastically, "but I'm not some romantic story from the 1970s. I learned that day that love isn't about what someone can give you or how they make you look. It's about respect, kindness, and character. I spent 3 months proving to Margaret and her family that I could be better, and when we married, I never forgot that lesson." Vanessa stood up, grabbing her designer purse. "I don't need a lecture from you. Daniel will choose me because I'm young, beautiful, and connected. What are you? A lonely old man living in a house that smells like mothballs." That's when she grabbed her coffee cup, the one I'd served her in Margaret's favorite china, and threw the contents at me. The coffee was cold by then, but the action was hot with malice. It soaked through my cardigan, dripped onto my pants. She was already heading for the door when she threw that parting shot about her father. I looked down at my ruined sweater, at the coffee staining the hardwood floors Margaret and I had refinished together, and I felt something I rarely felt. Real anger. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. It took a moment to find the name I was looking for, Marcus Blackwood. Marcus and I went back 20 years. We'd served together on a naval advisory board, and we'd stayed friends even after we'd both retired from that work. We met for lunch every few months, swapped stories about our kids, complained about our golf games. I pressed call. "Richard," Marcus's voice boomed through the phone. "How's my favorite old sailor?" "Marcus, I need you to come to my house, now, and I need you to bring your wife." There was a pause. Marcus knew me well enough to recognize when something was serious. "What's wrong?" "Your daughter just threw coffee on me and threatened to have me fired from whatever pathetic job I have. I think it's time you met your daughter's boyfriend's father, properly." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Marcus said, his voice suddenly cold and hard, the voice of a CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. I hung up and looked at my ruined cardigan one more time. Then I went to change. This was going to be interesting.